I have a, let's say, rather modest life, and I don't have a car. Don't spend enough a lot of money, and right now the salary we pay out as the founders in Neon aren't that high neither. Thank you very much for having me. I'm Jörg. I'm one of the co-founders of Neon. Neon is a banking challenger in Switzerland. I'm originally from Germany. I grew there up somewhere in the middle, in the north of Frankfurt. Was in the 70s. I turned 50 this year. So in the 80s, it was a completely different world, no internet, completely different political systems. I grew up there. My older sister, let's say normal family. I went to university in 1993, started what I would call financial engineering. It was a lot of math, but also some business around it. I live in Munich now. I used to go swimming every day when I was in school, and even at university, I did that a lot. Unfortunately, I do not do that anymore that often, which I miss a little bit. Next to that, my hobbies are maybe reading, honestly, also a lot of music. I listen to music mostly all the time. Right now, not, but typically I do. Sometimes people ask me about my height because it's very unusual. I'm 2 meters 8, which is really, very tall. So sometimes when I sit, I feel like a kindergarten when your parents invited and they sit on chairs that fit to them, which is sometimes a little bit painful in an airplane. I don't fly that often anymore. My colleagues made sometimes fun of me posting on their website, for instance, that I'm not very good with keys. Just to be precise here, honestly, I never lose keys in terms of I need to replace them, but I leave them somewhere, and then it takes me always some time to figure out where they could be. Sometimes it takes me 20 minutes before I can leave the office because they are somewhere, and I could find them. But that's really extraordinary. Typically, it's faster. Other topic I try to change a little bit. In the beginning of Neon, I really had a lot of chocolate and a lot of orange juice, and so a lot of, let's say, sweet stuff. I changed that a little bit over the last month, so I try to be more healthy with my life, maybe also due to my age or whatever it is. Yeah. I'm clearly more on Zurich Paradeplatz because I mentioned I live during the week more in Zurich, and at the weekend I'm in Munich. So I would call myself more the Zurich guy. I will go to Geneva, I think, next week, which I'm looking forward to it. It's a very nice location, but I haven't been there too many times. We focus right now on growing Neon, so it's more like, I would say, Paradeplatz guy. Paradeplatz for me means also a little bit actually the motivation why we started with Neon. I used to work in banking and consultant for quite some time, and if you want to see a little bit how banking works, you maybe should go to Paradeplatz 8 o'clock in the morning, see who's leaving the tram. And these are typically talented young guys, pretty high self-awareness and self-conscious, and you can like it, you maybe can even not like it, but it was for me a little bit motivation to change that. And actually, when I'm at 8 o'clock in the morning at Paradeplatz, I think we did the right thing with Neon to try to change the banking system a little bit. When I was younger, I read a lot. Then during university and later, it wasn't that often anymore. But there are some books that were really important to me. Actually, it's a Swiss author, Friedrich Dürrenmatt, probably one of the two most known. And he had a novel, I think, in German, Justiz. The English name, I needed to look it up because I read it in German, is maybe even closer to the content. It's the execution of justice. And I think I read it when I was 16, 17 years old. And it's really about perception and reality and motives why people act and truth. And so I really like this kind of topics. Maybe that's what I took out of it. Maybe there are different other ideas. People couldn't think about it, but that's a book I really enjoyed reading, and I think I've read it several times. And the book, I think I I gifted most to friends are maybe books I liked when I was a little bit older. One was also a German one. He's an author. I think he's not really popular outside Germany. Thomas Using. He is, I think he's known in the English space a little bit. The German title is Wie es leuchtet. It's a book about the, let's say, the early 19th, and he described 5, 6, 7 perspectives of the changes we saw after the wall in Berlin went down, and I really like that. And another one is more a fun book. It's Uniklinik. It's also, I think, only published in German. It makes a little bit, or based on the Austrian author Thomas Bernhard. It's some kind of fun making out of Thomas Bernhard, and that's also something I really enjoyed. Had to think a little bit about what should be read here, and honestly, after 5 seconds, I came up with thank you, because I think, or what I somehow learned in the last years is, well, I think it's good to be friendly. That's a little bit the idea of how people can coexist and better and improve themselves and get encouraged. So I think I would just do a thank you, and making maybe people think when they could say thank you again or could be friendly to each other. Maybe it was due to my English of the last year. So over the last time, I thought, when we started with Neon, and maybe even before, I think people are, or it seems that society and people, how they act and how they communicate together changed or has changed over the last years. And I think it would be wise to, on one hand, of course, to respect that, because and to reflect that, and on the other hand, maybe to get a little bit more friendly to each other. It's a little bit maybe a long answer. I'm not a serial entrepreneur. Neon is the first startup, and most likely also the only I would do in life. Of course, it's always unsecure what you do in the future, what you plan, but I'm not that guy who said, okay, I want to start one and then the next, and ultimate goal is to become rich by that. We started Neon in 2017. The idea was a little bit earlier. It was all of the co-founders worked together in consulting. So we actually had a job where we could have, or we had a high salary, and maybe even an early retirement could have been an option if you work as a consultant for a little bit longer. Honestly, the personal financial situation was not a trigger for me to found Neon, and is actually also not a trigger for me right now. I have a, let's say, rather modest life, and I don't have a car. Don't spend a lot of money, and right now the salary we pay out as the founders in Neon aren't that high neither. So for me, it's less, or let's say I have somehow the freedom, or maybe even I ignore it a little bit about my personal financial situation. So it's not a good sign if you somehow say he's ignoring it. You must be aware of it. But it's not a big part for me in my life right now to think about what is my personal financial wealth or net worth. 5 years vision is, on one hand, it's maybe a little bit, and don't get me wrong, a standard question in terms of what do you want to do in 5 years, or where you want to be. But if I would look back 5 years from now, and it would be 2018, we just launched, we had a user growth that was a little bit under what we expected. We had a lot of technical issues, really very basic topics, the card, the app, and all that. So 5 years with that perspective is a very, very long time for us. We want to be a very relevant Swiss player in the banking scene. We want to improve the market. We want to improve our product. We want to force other banks to also to be more customer oriented. And that's where we want to be in 5 years. If you think about figures, we should be somewhere around 400,000 clients, maybe. We should be really relevant in the market in terms of having a larger scope of products that we could offer, having a very healthy client base, still, of course, very people that are really into mobile banking. that's the only channel we will have also, I think, in 5 years. And yeah, so it sounds maybe a little bit boring, but we want to have more of the same and want to be a little bit larger, more relevant, more visible also on the market. That's what we would like to achieve in 5 years. For the company, it's right now that we used a lot of money from investors like our crowd to grow the company. And for us, it's also the next important step is to become profitable, meaning that we don't need more external money, but rather are in a situation where we can fund our growth. We are in a market, in an industry, banking, that is very important for Switzerland, that is rather large and on the other hand, rather slow. I mean, what we did, we copied ideas from other industries in the banking world and applied it to the financial products. We for Neon did it in the last 5-6 years. Others started maybe a little bit earlier. If you look at the change, and I think in the beginning I mentioned the 18th where we didn't have internet, and in the 19th some of the earlier banks started to adopt it. And the structural change, the foundation was 20 years. Now banks really change their operating model, close branches, change their pricing, all that stuff. So honestly, I hope it doesn't sound arrogant, but right now I don't feel that we have a next wave of disruption already, but rather I think we're still positioned for Neon to be still one of the disruptor. Maybe there will be completely new technical changes. I don't know. I'm not a real expert about maybe artificial intelligence or quantum computing or whatever it is, but right now I don't fear it. We have been asked several times, well, what is the plan, not only on the product side or on the client side, but also with the shareholder structure. Of course, some of our investors want to get the money back in terms of hopefully more. That's the idea of an investment. We don't have any investor who really has, let's say, some kind of strict timing in terms of they need to close a fund in 2 years or 3 years or whatsoever. We have more investors who believe in long-term investments, and currently we don't have any discussions ongoing about exits or other scenarios. Also internally very transparent. Everyone has access more or less to every data. We have a dashboard, or we have roughly, I think, 100 different dashboards where you can see how many new clients or what's the number of card transactions in the last 24 hours and whatsoever. And we launched a trading product in July. And right now we see really very nice growth rates. So right now, at least 2 times, 3 times a year, I look on the trading figures. And typically I'm getting happy a bit, or sometimes, of course, if there's a day where it's not a lot of trading, then we started asking ourselves what's the effect, and then we learn here a lot about it, and that's what I look at currently most. Maybe this will change after some first excitement, but right now that's probably the thing that everyone from Neon looks at it maybe once or twice a day. Actually, it's a pretty good question because when you start your own company, maybe your personal involvement gets higher, or maybe sometimes even other way around, that people see the risk and hence get frightened and then want to have some distance. We had also one co-founder who said more or less after a year, hey, I personally, I just noticed I'm not the guy for that. And we talked about it. That was, I think, very good discussions we had. And then we find a solution where he still could contribute to Neon, but not anymore in this position where he feels somehow exposed. Personally, I haven't had these kind of personal feelings that, oh, wow, now everything is too hard, everything is too risky, everything is too positive. You could also have it maybe in the other direction. So for me, I felt quite stable. The the biggest challenges we saw as a company was actually the funding. When we started Neon, since we only focus on the Swiss market, we were aware that funding will be the biggest problem. We didn't fear competition as our top risk or banks' reaction, but actually starting Neon in a market when investors could invest in companies like Revolut or European banks or global banks, and we started to be honest, only in a smaller market. We saw that could be the biggest risk. We managed those. However, our risk seems somehow to be valid because currently only Swiss investors have invested significantly in Neon. So it was always a local game, and hence the financing risk or funding risk was the highest risk. Right now we manage also with a crowd to raise enough money to become break even. It's still a challenge because we have to deliver the products. The clients have to react as expected, as wanted. That's a little bit than the planning exercise. But right now we are in the position, other than maybe other fintechs, that we don't have to run to get the next funding round, but rather right now are in a position where we say we can still manage. If things in next year will not turn out to be as planned, we see a risk to get maybe a little bit of funding. But again, the current plan, and that's the very clear will of the board, of all co-founders, is to avoid additional funding. And we're really working hard with the whole team on that. From a very abstract way or from a very distant way, I think I like it because on one dimension, I really do like what I do with Neon and the work and working with people, seeing the team grow, seeing the company grow, the client base. But on the other hand, having the opportunity to have let's say, a life where people don't really have to work, but rather spend their time what they want to do or with whom they want to do. I think that's a good thought, especially after a certain age, maybe even better. So that's what I like about it. To me, I don't spend enough time with my personal financial situation. I don't know why, but honestly, it's just not really my thing. I have my account. I have enough money to pay the bills. I not have enough money to to retire, but that's fine for me. And honestly, since I don't invest much money in other shares, I don't have any kind of particular investments. I'm very boring investor. Yeah, that's it. So personally, I see the benefit, but I don't want to go and do the work. Also very transparent. I would not start Neon if I had just maybe, I don't know, money from my parents, then of course, but right now for me, it's not an option, to be honest, to think about it, but rather not that I thought through it and then I think, okay, it's not an option. I don't, maybe it's a little bit too far away for me. That could also be an answer. Yeah. Also here, two answers. On one hand, I think we are also as a team, people have maybe different opinion. We really rely on, let's say, facts, figures, data, comparison, stuff like this. So it's really more or less a fact-based decision. However, for me, it's also typically a lot of, let's say, maybe patterns that you recognize, and then you already might have come up with a solution. So I'm sometimes in decisions, I have very fast intuition in terms of what is my gut feeling, what would I do. Then, of course, we look at the figures, but typically, I personally, from let's say my inner decision process is pretty fast. So it doesn't take me too long to decide. I was in consulting for 12 years, I think. Made also my career, and there I had a formal and informal mentor, and it was the same person. So the formal means I was more or less assigned to it, but of course I could have changed it if I didn't want it. But that was a real mentor in a way that he mentors my personal career or my career in that company, but also in other aspects. After we have this call, I'm going to meet him. He retired now, which was very difficult for him because he also loved his job for many years. And yeah, he was, I would call, a real mentor here. And still, sometimes despite the fact that I just said I make my decisions very quickly, we talk about decisions I made, and maybe then he has another opinion, maybe not. Maybe that's also a little bit the issue, that in many cases I think we have more or less the same opinion, which is then maybe a good sign, but maybe, yeah. But he's a real mentor, I think. He is living now in France and Munich, so I ran into him last time, I think 2 months ago. Now we meet today, but we haven't maybe also met for half a year. The mentoring stuff was, I think, also when we were in the same company. Then we had a very regular exchange. Right now it's more like, hey, I have this idea, what do you think? Or maybe also just a personal update, hey, I did that, or whatever. I think that's really something I can answer not as Neon, because we are by no ways let's say, FINMA regulated company, and we cannot do any investment advice, and we are very careful about it. Personally, I spend a lot of money in ETFs that somehow build a large market index. Being from Germany, people go to the DAX, which is the top 40 right now of the German economy. You could also go to a more global, which might be even more diversified. I also invested a little bit in companies I just liked. Point of time, I liked Apple, and I spent some money here, and that was a good decision, but that could have also been a stupid one. So I would go rather with a broad portfolio, and ETFs are probably a product that help. There are platforms that charge you high charges for investments. Others, like Neon, for instance, don't ask you for a long-term investment fee. Our fees are significant when you buy or sell, but not when you hold. And this supports the idea of having maybe investments for a little bit longer time. We will have actually our Christmas celebration will be a fondue in our office this year. Last year we went to Zurich Lake and had there our fondue. This year we do it, but yeah, happy to have this. My family is more from the north. It's rural area, 2 hours in the north of Frankfurt. There is only one, I would say, restaurant at all in the town where I grew up. So that's a clear recommendation. I think you could even go bowling there. So now you have a little bit the feeling what kind of restaurant this might be. Now the area where I'm from, again, it's in the north of Frankfurt. Actually, the nature is pretty nice. We have a lot of forests, some small, very small mountains, especially in Switzerland, but it's nice walk. Kassel is the larger town. It's known for Documenta, which is an art exhibition, I think, every 4 years. And it has a nice park. But if you take the train from Munich to Hamburg or whatever, you necessarily don't need to stop there.